declared dead, abandoned on Mars. For 13 years, 4,000 souls survived on salvaged suits, and the Algae, their overseers, forgot. When rescue finally came, they found a thriving civilization and a corporate nightmare come true. The air tasted of rust and regret. Eris Thorn tightened the worn seals on his pressure suit. The familiar rasp of the fabric, a grim counterpoint to the new, terrifying symphony filling the Solus 3 terraforming dome. It wasn't the usual low hum of life support, or the distant whine of atmospheric processors. This was a scream, a high-pitched metallic shriek tearing through the reinforced biopolymer ceiling, a kilometer above, followed by the gut-churning roar of escaping atmosphere. Emergency lights bathed the hydroponic tiers in pulsing crimson, casting monstrous, dancing shadows from the trembling stalks of genetically modified wheat. The impact tremor threw a risk against the nutrient vat controls. Alarms, previously localized shrieks, coalesced into a single, deafening banshee wail across the entire comms network. His HUD flickered wildly, overlaying damage reports, catastrophic hull breach, Sector Gamma 7, atmospheric pressure plummeting, containment failure imminent, Thorn to control, report. He barked into his helmet mic, his voice tight with a fear he refused to acknowledge. Static hissed back, punctuated by fragmented shouts and the sickening pop hiss of seals failing. Somewhere distant, Gamma 7 is gone. Myra Chen's voice crackled over the local work crew channel, laced with panic. Hull breach. It's tearing wider. Winds, hurricane force, pulling people out. The transmission dissolved into static and a final choked cry. Eris didn't hesitate. He slammed the emergency lockdown sequence for his sector, Beta 9, the heavy blast doors grinding shut with agonizing slowness. Through the thick viewport, he saw the horror unfold. The sky, usually a controlled twilight blue mimicking Earth's dusk, was now a vortex of screaming wind and debris. A jagged rent, easily 50 meters across, marred the distant dome ceiling. Figures in suits, tiny and helpless, tumbled like discarded dolls towards the lethal vacuum beyond the widening tier. The lush green of the agricultural tiers near Gamma 7, visibly withered and browned as the precious air screamed out into the Martian void. Solus 3 wasn't just a dome. It was a colossal, self-contained ecosystem, humanity's most ambitious foothold on the Red Planet, home to nearly 5,000 souls, engineers, botanists, geologists, support staff, and their families, all working under the distant, watchful eye of the Cerberus Terraforming Consortium CTC. Their mission, prepare Mars for MASS colonization. Now, that dream was hemorrhaging into space. Hours bled into a nightmare. Eris, designated as sector lead due to his decade of service, found himself in the crowded, dimly lit emergency bunker deep within the dome's substructure. The air was thick with the smell of fear, ozone, and recycled sweat. Power flickered. Screens showed the grim reality. Gamma 7 completely depressurized a tomb. Sections adjacent were sealed off, pressure unstable. Initial estimates were grim, at least 800 dead or missing. The rest, huddled in sealed sectors or bunkers like this one, were survivors only by technicality. The dome's integrity was compromised. Life support was failing. Eris pushed through the throng towards the makeshift command table. Lena Petrova, the dome's chief engineer, looked like she'd aged 20 years. Her face was smudged with grime, her eyes hollow. Structural integrity at 42% and falling, she rasped, pointing to a cracked screen. The breach. It's not stabilizing. Secondary fractures are propagating. Main atmospheric processors are offline in Gamma and Epsilon sectors. Backup power. We have maybe 48 hours at minimal life support levels for the remaining pressurized zones. She paused, swallowing hard. We lost primary comms with Cerberus command, secondary relays. Intermittent, a cold dread settled in Eris's gut. Minimal life support. Failing comes. A dome dying around them. He looked at the faces around him. Mira Chen, pale and trembling, clutching a thermal blanket. Ben Cato, the young hydroponics tech, wide-eyed with shock. Old Doc Faraday, methodically, checking a dwindling medkit. Civilians, scientists, technicians, not soldiers, not pioneers, equipped for raw survival. 2 days later, the flickering hollow projector in the bunker finally resolved into the stern, perfectly groomed visage of Director Helena Vance of CTC Command, orbiting high above Mars on the luxury station Olympus Mons. The image was crystal clear, devoid of static. The contrast to their own grimy, oxygen-starved reality was jarring. Chief Petruva, Sector Lead Thorn, Vance began, her voice smooth, devoid of inflection. We've analyzed the telemetry from Solus 3. The structural damage is extensive. Catastrophic cascade failure initiated by the Gamma-7 impact event. Impact event, Lena snapped, her voice raw. We were hit. By what? A high-velocity microasteroid swarm. Statistically improbable but not impossible, Vance stated coolly. Our deep space tracking algorithms registered the swarm too late for effective countermeasures. An unfortunate anomaly. Eris clenched his fists. Unfortunate anomaly. 800 lives. Our priority is the viability of the Solus program and the protection of CTC assets, Vance continued, ignoring Lena's glare. Given the severity of the structural compromise and the critical failure of primary life support across 65% of the dome's volume, coupled with the loss of key personnel and infrastructure, a recovery operation is deemed non-viable. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Non-viable. Eris heard his own voice, flat and dangerous. You're abandoning us? Vance's expression remained impassive. CTC regrets the loss of life. Evacuation resources are finite and strategically allocated, projecting required rescue tonnage against current Martian orbital logistics, and the unstable condition of Solus 3 presents an unacceptable risk to CTC personnel and equipment. The projected survival window for the remaining pressurized zones, even with rationing, is estimated at 30 days, maximum. A rescue mission could not arrive within that time frame. She leaned slightly forward, her gaze piercing through the light years. Therefore, it is with profound regret that CTC Command must declare Solus 3 a total loss. All personnel are hereby instructed to enact end-of-life protocols Alpha through Gamma, conserve emergency power, utilize remaining resources for comfort, transmit final logs via secondary burst transmission. CTC grieves with the families. Vance out. The hull image vanished, leaving only the oppressive hum of failing systems and the ragged breathing of the survivors. The message was clear. Asterisk, you are already dead. Die quietly. Asterisk, a young woman near the back whimpered. Ben Cato slammed his fist against a bulkhead. Lena Petrova sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. Eris Thorne felt the cold hand of corporate death grip his heart. Then, beneath the despair, a spark ignited. Fury. Pure, unadulterated fury. Unacceptable risk. Total loss. They were numbers on a balance sheet, liabilities to be written off. He looked around at the faces, not liabilities, but people. Mira's fierce intelligence, Ben's youthful energy, Doc Faraday's quiet competence, Lena's unwavering grit. His own hands, calloused from decades of tending alien soil. Screw their protocols, Eris said, his voice low, but cutting through the silence. Screw their comfort. They've written our obituary. Let's prove them wrong. Asterisk hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. Survival was a brutal equation of scavenging, jury-rigging, and sheer bloody-minded stubbornness. The immediate priority was air and shelter. The bunker was safe, deep, and relatively intact, but designed for short-term emergencies. They sealed every possible conduit, patched microfractures with emergency sealant foam, and cannibalized ventilation systems from depressurized sectors using teams in salvaged EVA suits patched with tape, their power cells dwindling, their displays flickering ghosts of data. Each foray was a gamble. Suit failures claimed 3 more lives in the first week. Every death was a hammer blow, a reminder of Vance's cold calculus. Water came next. The main recycling plant was in Gamma Sector gone. They rigged primitive condensers, sucking precious moisture from the still damp soil in sealed hydroponic bays, distilling it painstakingly over scavenged heating elements powered by the bunker's overtaxed auxiliary generator. Every drop was rationed, tasted faintly of minerals and despair. Food was the most immediate terror. The hydroponic farms in the pressurized sectors were dying. Without stable light, temperature, and the complex nutrient flow controlled by the dome's central AI now silent, crops withered. Rations from the emergency bunkers were vanishingly small, meant for days, not weeks. It was Ben Cato, haunted by the memory of Myra Chen describing the algae vats in her lost sector, who had the desperate idea. The algae, the chlorella martensis strain. It's tough. Engineered for high CO2 absorption, low light tolerance. Some vats. Maybe they survived the depressurization. If we could find them, salvage the cultures. It was a mad gamble. Sector Gamma 7 was a frozen, airless tomb littered with debris and the bodies of their friends. But it was the only gamble they had. Eris led the team, Ben, Mira refusing to be left behind, and 2 others with the suits. The journey through the corpse of the dome was a descent into hell. Twisted metal, frozen bodies in impossible poses, the eerie silence broken only by their own ragged breathing and the crunch of frost underfoot. They found the main algae cultivation lab partially intact, shielded by collapsed girders. Inside, most vats were shattered, their vibrant green contents frozen solid or boiled away. But in one corner, 3 reinforced experimental vats, designed for stress testing, remained miraculously sealed. Inside, a thick, murky green sludge pulsed faintly under the beam of Arisa's helmet lamp. Life signs. Ben's voice was a strangled sob over the cum. They're dormant, but alive, cold-shocked, but viable. Hauling those heavy vats back to the bunker. Through the treacherous ruins was an ordeal that nearly cost them 2 more suits and Ben's life. When a walkway gave way, but they made it. The algae became their lifeline. Ben and Mira, working in a makeshift lab cobbled together from scavenged parts, coaxed the cultures back. They fed it CO2 from their own exhalations, water from the condensers, and light from salvaged low-power leads to the bunker's generator. It grew, slowly, stubbornly, in the dim, cold confines of their underground refuge. It wasn't appetizing, a nutrient-rich, vaguely spinach-smelling paste, but it was calories. It was life. The suits became their second skin and their greatest vulnerability. CTC's standard issue EVA suits were robust, but not designed for constant, long-term use. Seals degraded, joints stiffened, power cells irreplaceable, slowly died. They became experts in suit triage. Eris, with his mechanical background, and Lena, with her systems knowledge, led the suit corps. They cannibalized dead suits to repair living ones. They learned to patch leaks with layers of sealant and scraps of suit fabric. They rigged crude external battery packs, scavenged from dead rovers and maintenance bots. Movement became stiff, labored. Every EVA was a calculated risk, a slow dance, with vacuum. They lost people to suit failures, a sudden leak, a frozen joint trapping someone too far from safety, a power cell giving out Each loss was a scar on the community's soul, hardening their resolve, even as it hollowed them out. Time lost meaning measured in Earth days. They marked it by the slow depletion of salvageable resources, the generational cycles of the algae. The deepening lines on their faces reflected in polished metal shards. Years bled into each other. The bunker, christened Haven with grim irony, expanded. Using salvaged mining charges carefully, so carefully, they blasted deeper into the Martian bedrock, creating more living space, more room for algae vats, lit by increasingly sophisticated LED arrays, powered by jury-rigged solar panels, mounted precariously on the surface near bunker vents. Mira and Ben became the undisputed masters of the green. They experimented, cross-culturing strains, selecting for faster growth, higher nutritional yield, better tolerance to their harsh conditions. The algae paste remained the staple, but they coaxed it into variations, a thicker gruel, a thinner broth. They discovered it could be partially dehydrated into brittle, tasteless crackers. It was monotonous, often nauseating, but it sustained them. Community solidified through shared hardship. Leadership wasn't dictated, it evolved. Aris remained the pragmatic organizer, the one who made the hard decisions about resource allocation, EVA priorities, and risk assessment. Lena kept Haven's fragile infrastructure, power, air scrubbers, water recyclers functioning through sheer ingenuity and salvaged parts. Doc Faraday, with dwindling medical supplies, became an expert in algae poultices and setting bones, with scrap metal splints. Myra and Ben were revered as the keepers of the green. Children were born in Haven, 3 in the first 5 years. Their first breaths were of recycled Haven air, their first food the green paste. They learned to walk in the cramped tunnels, their world defined by rock walls and the gentle hum of algae pumps. They were the first true Martians, born of dust and defiance. They never forgot Cerberus. Vance's message played in their collective memory, a constant fuel for their determination. They monitored the silent comes channels, a ritual more symbolic than practical. Eris insisted on maintaining a log, not for CTC, but for themselves, and for whoever might find them. He recorded their struggles, their losses, their tiny victories, the first successful cultivation of a lichen scraped from a surface rock sample, the completion of the new solar array that finally gave them a buffer against generator failure, the birth of each child. It was a chronicle of resilience written in the language of algae and salvaged steel. Nearly 7 Martian years, roughly 13 Earth years after the breach, the impossible happened. Ben was on a routine surface EVA, checking the solar array connections. The barren, rust-colored landscape stretched endlessly under the thin, cold atmosphere, punctuated only by the distant skeletal ruins of Solasri's upper structures. Suddenly, his suit crackled. Not the usual static, but a distinct, modulated signal. Any station. This is Cerberus rescue vessel, Persephone. On approach vector Solus 3, repeat. Cerberus rescue vessel Persephone, hailing Solus 3, or any survivors. Respond. Ben froze. He thought it was a hallucination, a trick of oxygen deprivation or fatigue. He fumbled with his comm unit, his thickly gloved fingers clumsy. Persephone, this is Benjamin Cato, Solus 3 survivor. Repeat, Solus 3 survivor. Do you copy? Over. The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Then, a voice, sharp with disbelief and confusion. Kaito. Benjamin Cato, Solus 3 survivor. Confirm your status. We show Solus 3 as derelict. Catastrophic loss of life 13 years ago. Repeat. Confirm status. We're alive, Ben shouted, tears fogging his visor. We're in the substructure. Haven, we have survivors. Air, water, food. We're alive. Coordinates transmitting. Chaos erupted in Haven when Ben stumbled back down the access tunnel, babbling the news. Disbelief warred with hysterical joy. 7 years of grim endurance, shattered in an instant. They crowded this single functional external camera feed, watching as the sleek, powerful shape of the Persephone descended through the thin atmosphere, landing thrusters kicking up plumes of ochre dust a kilometer from the ruined dome. Shuttles detached, heading not for the dome, but towards the coordinates Ben had given the unassuming camouflaged entrance to Haven. The airlock cycled open. Eris Thorn stood at the forefront, clad in his patched and repatched EVA suit, the helmet seals worn smooth. Behind him stood the people of Haven, gaunt, weathered faces etched with years of hardship, but standing tall. Children peered out from behind legs, their eyes wide with curiosity at the strangers in pristine, modern pressure suits. Captain Alara Bonse, no relation, she'd hastily assured them, stepped through, removing her helmet. Her face, professionally composed moments before, registered utter shock. Her gaze swept over the crowded, dimly lit cavern. It took in the rows of bubbling algae vats, glowing under LED lights, the intricate network of pipes and wires salvaged from 1,000 sources, the hydroponic racks holding not earth crops, but hardy Martian lichens and mutated strains of their original plants. It lingered on the children, their clothes made from woven suit liner and algae fiber. It took in the walls adorned with schematics, resource tallies etched onto metal plates, and names the long list of the fallen by the stars. Captain Vance breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Her crew, crowding the airlock behind her, wore identical expressions of stunned disbelief. You survived. Here, for 13 years. We adapted, Eris said, his voice rough but steady. He gestured around him. We used what Cerberus left behind when they wrote us off. Our suits, our algae, our wits. A comms officer stepped forward, holding a tablet. Captain, initial scans. They've terraformed down here. Oxygen-nitrogen mix stable at 18.5%. Temperature regulated. Water recycling efficiency. It's primitive, but functional. And the biomass, the algae production, it's sustaining them. It's incredible. Captain Vance looked from the scans to Eris, to the defiant faces of the Haven survivors. The polished corporate narrative of a tragic, unavoidable loss collided violently with the raw, undeniable evidence of human resilience before her. Director? Elena Vance, she began, then stopped, shaking her head slightly, a flicker of something like disgust crossing her features. Command, they believed Solus 3 was a tomb. They never imagined. This? They didn't look, Mira Chen said, stepping forward. Her voice was quiet, but carried the weight of years. They calculated the risk, the cost, and closed the ledger. We weren't worth the expense. She gestured to the thriving algae vats. We found our worth in the green. The arrival of the Persephone wasn't an end, but another beginning. Medical teams tended to the survivors, marveling at their health, despite years of near starvation, rations, and harsh conditions. Engineers from the ship stared in disbelief at the jury-rigged systems keeping Haven alive, a testament to ingenuity born of desperation. The children of Haven stared wide-eyed at the vastness of the rescue ship, a world beyond rock walls and green vats. News of the Solus 3 survivors rocketed through the Cerberus Consortium and the wider Earth-Mars network. It was a public relations nightmare wrapped in a scientific miracle. Director Elena Bonse, facing intense scrutiny and accusations of criminal negligence, resigned abruptly. The official story shifted, emphasizing the miraculous survival against impossible odds. Carefully downplaying the cold calculus of the abandonment, Eris Thorn stood on the surface. Beside the landed Persephone, breathing unfiltered but thin Martian air through a simple mask. He looked back at the camouflaged entrance to Haven, then at the distant, skeletal ruins of the Solus 3 dome. Ben and Mira joined him, each holding one of the Haven-born children. They wanted to write. Mars and steel and algorithms, Eris said, his voice quiet. They forgot about blood and bone and green slime. Mira smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in years. She held up a small sealed vial containing a dense culture of Chlorella martensis, the Haven strain. This, she said, is the real legacy. Not their failed dome. This algae. It survived the void. It fed us. It is Mars, adapting. It's the future. Ben put an arm around her, looking at the child in his arms. A future they didn't plan for. One we built ourselves. The red planet stretched before them, harsh and beautiful. The corporate overseers had seen only loss and liability. The survivors of Haven saw something else, a world that could be nurtured, not just conquered, with the stubborn, unassuming green heart of the algae as their guide. They had been written off, left for dead, forgotten. And from that desolation, fueled by fury and fed by green slime, they had not just survived, they had learned to thrive. They had written their own story on Mars, in indelible green, the shockwaves of their survival and the quiet power of their algae would echo long after the corporate apologies faded into the thin Martian air.